This is one book I'm reading, doctoral book. This is the penultimate book. There's a new one out that I also have. Okay, so the analogy is that a centaur is a technical term of a human being augmented by a machine. But a reverse centaur is a machine that is augmented by the presence of a human. So like a reverse centaur, it's like the flip-on technology, whereas in the Industrial Revolution, machines were augmenting human abilities. A human being would operate a press that could apply more pressure or do more work than a human being could alone, or basically the Industrial Revolution was about tools that would enhance human capability, human speed, human strength. But now the reverse centaur is the current state of technology where people are employed, if they're employed at all, they're employed to augment the abilities of a machine. The machine is the thing. And how AI fits in this. There's a very enlightening, this is a deep dive book. There's a lot of research in here. It's sort of a condensation of more than a decade of data about how all kinds of different platforms do things. Amazon, don't mention YouTube specifically, but use TikTok as the video platform. But the methods that TikTok was using for optimization, for like viewership manipulation optimization, a lot of the things that in here that apply to TikTok, I have been in my mental space applying to the way YouTube is doing it. And I think I've come to some realizations that this is actually very insightful. One of the things they talk about TikTok is how TikTok's algorithm keeps content creators in check using a system that was sort of perfected or definitely like applied like to perfection with Uber, with the way that Uber manipulates its drivers and like gives preferential treatment to certain drivers and preferential routes and what it pays its drivers. It's like the shell game that's constantly changing the rules silently, where like on Uber, for example, a driver might either decide that they're going to get by taking every single ride that's offered them and deliver as many rides as possible and just to scrape up as much change as they can to pay their bills. And the other type of Uber driver are the ones who are super, super selective, and they hold out waiting for prime rides that are the most profitable or going the most distance or going to neighborhoods that are convenient for them to pick up the next fare, whatever. They're being very selective. And so when Uber got to understand that people were kind of dividing themselves into these two kinds of drivers, then they started shifting what they would pay a driver per ride, with the idea that some people that were taking every single ride were earning less and less and less and less, and Uber was giving preference to drivers that were being selective by enticing them with really like good margins on a few of their early fares. And so they think, oh wow, I'm really good at this. I'm doing things the right way. I've got the right philosophy. And then inexplicably, Uber would all of a sudden just greatly diminish the amount of profit that the driver was going to get for every subsequent fare. And then when the drivers would get so frustrated with the little money that they're making that they would want to drop out and stop driving altogether, then Uber would again put them like at the top of the tier to give them like a higher profits to get them back on the road. And they think, oh, well, now I'm back in the game. And then once they start driving again, they bring down the profit margin. And the idea is to try to keep the profit margin for every single driver right at the point where they're going to cover their bills. They're not going to be so starved that they'll just give up altogether, but they're not going to be so profitable that they won't drive as much as possible. And it's like Amazon was doing the same thing with its delivery drivers. The idea is to, if they push too far, the person's just going to quit the platform and do something else. And so they try to keep people in the game, making content on TikTok, for example, by doing this same thing where they're throttling the incentives With Uber, it's what they earn per ride. On TikTok or YouTube, it's going to be ad revenue or viewership or subscribers or combinations thereof. And it explained a lot this idea that there's that they have special industry terms for all these things, and there's a whole vocabulary in the book. I'm not going to bother to go through because I'm not doing a book review, but there's a whole vocabulary of industry terms that are used to describe these techniques. And it made me realize that my efforts to chase around views and revenue and try to get on the feeds, I've shown the data all the time. It's one of my hobbies of showing YouTube data in the studio. But the unseen hand of the whole thing is that what I really didn't come to realize, but I realized when I read the Corey doctoral book, is YouTube has been doing for many years, at least the last 8 years with my channel, is that it will throttle down my views and my viewership and take me off the feeds until such a point as I complain about it enough. And then when I'm really complaining about it to the point where it looks like I might quit the platform altogether, YouTube throws me a bone and for whatever reason, inexplicably will put one of my videos on the feeds and it'll go mini viral and I'll get like 200,000, 300,000 views or something on a video. And then I'll go and I'll try and repeat that by saying, okay, this is what YouTube wants, and I'll make more content just like that. And every subsequent time that I would make a video just like that one that it really pushed, those subsequent videos just, get average views. So they don't get on the feeds. And so the same thing is what they did on TikTok, what they did with Uber drivers and the share of the ride that they get. It's this thing where I'm trying to do the dance. I'm trying to do the magical dance to appease the algorithm so that I can get the video seen enough that my channel can survive financially and I can pay for the cost of my car. If FranLab were an Uber, right? If FranLab were an Uber, the cost of upkeep of the FranLab would, I need that to be kept. And so YouTube has been like throttling my content, thinking that, again, keeping me in that margin where maybe I can just appear to get by or be satisfied enough to keep making content, but not so completely disgusted that I just get off the platform altogether. So I don't know. There seems to be a lot of truth to this psychological manipulation of just inexplicably favoring a content creator for a short period of time and then just discarding interest in that content creator for maybe forever or maybe for a year. And when it seems like the content creator isn't going to be making content anymore because they're just too frustrated or they're just not getting enough return, YouTube will just inexplicably boost that channel like a random video. It seems like this is what's been happening. So it was very insightful. Enshittification. I've been waiting to start the next one because it's just it's so it's such a disturbing read. I'm trying to put some buffer. I need to read something more pleasant. Can't just binge read doom books. I also got a copy of Project Maven, which is going to be even more disturbing. Not to be confused with Project Hail Mary. Project Maven, it's not a novel. At least it shouldn't be. It's the horrible, horrible true story. That new word, enshittification, is the best word ever. Yes, there is a description in the book about the origin of the term. Because enshittification isn't just a way to say something got worse, it's an analysis that explains the way an online service gets worse, how that worsening unfolds, and the contagion that's causing everything to get worse. The basic idea of enshittification is that if a platform can exploit its users, it will. And probably the long arc of this book is how all these huge companies, Amazon, TikTok, YouTube, Uber, basically the gig economy and the gig marketplace, because like Amazon is both. It's the gig economy and the gig marketplace because it's not only like a gig economy where it's trying to get people to work for, without being an employee, but it's also a marketplace, Amazon, where it's basically doing the robber baron technique of replacing the Main Street store with the company store and making everyone beholden to it. But the idea behind enshittification is that there was a time not too long ago when companies just could not get away with abusing all their customers, that people would leave. But it goes back to the monopolistic days of like the phone company, back when there was the phone company, not phone companies plural. There was just the phone company. And like the film The President's Analyst, there's a speech in there. Well, no spoilers. Well, it kind of is spoilers, but if you watch The President's Analyst, it ends up to this pinnacle where the protagonist is saying, people have to hate the phone company. And the person's like, oh, well, of course people hate the phone company. He says, no, you don't understand. People really have to hate the phone company. And it was a profound thing to say at the time, because at the time that it was the phone company. There was no competition. If you had a phone, if you communicated with anyone by phone in America, there was one company. And they not only owned the phone line, they owned the phone. And they owned the receiver that you put up to your head. And they owned the cable that connected the receiver to the telephone. And all the accessories. And it wasn't just a service. It was like, it was illegal for you to do anything to anything that the phone company owned. If you messed around with your own telephone, if you changed it, if you modified it, it was basically a criminal act. You couldn't do anything. If you wanted something fixed with the telephone, you had to call the phone company. They sent a guy out and actually replaced your phone or fixed your phone. You weren't allowed to touch those wires. You weren't allowed to mess around with your phone. You weren't allowed to repair it. And that was the law for a long, long, long time. Decades. And we're kind of going back to that now. And enshittification is sort of like that. It's like the phone company on a global scale, where companies become monopolistic. Even if there's other companies doing exactly the same thing, they simply don't care. They don't care if any of their customers are upset at them. They get you locked into a contract where it's the only choice that you have is to not use the platform. And where from a capitalistic standpoint, it's like, well, that's the free marketplace. That's how enterprise should be. Except the idea is that so many of these applications, platforms, services embed themselves into the culture to become indispensable. They talk about Adobe and what Adobe did to Photoshop and other platforms like that, where a company gets embedded into like a complete industry. Like Adobe became like indispensable in the illustration industry and the publishing industry. And then they'll make changes to go from like the idea that you buy Adobe 22 or Adobe 20 and you buy this suite and you own this software to putting everything on the cloud and making everything subscription based. And then once they hook everyone into getting rid of their bought software in favor of cloud-based stuff and get people into subscriptions, then they'll take a section of what they offer that's like embedded in like the general software package, and they realize that everyone's using this thing. Well, now that's not going to become like that. That's not going to be like a standard part of the software package anymore. We're going to take that out and make it a special add-on, and we're going to make that very, very expensive. And like 80% of the people are going to need to buy that to make this function, and they're going to have to buy it every month. They're not going to be able to own it. And that's part of enshittification. It's being hostile to your customers on purpose because you've trapped them in a room and you basically have been selling them oxygen, and now you can fleece them for as much as you want because you're not going to let them leave that room, and you're going to charge them whatever you want for the air that they have to breathe. And that's enshittification. It's happening globally. And it's largely why the cost of living is so unaffordable. Because just about anything that you need in the modern world that you're almost required to have, a cell phone, an app, a platform, a service, something like PayPal or Venmo or anything like that. Like all these, money services to allow you to pay your rent, or, your landlord will require that you have this service to be able to pay your rent, or to communicate with the landlord or something, and then you have to pay for that, or just all these costs that add up. The idea that to get like a decent cost on groceries, you have to have like a subscription to a grocery store. You basically have to buy your groceries in advance, or pay a fee above your groceries to get a discount, and hopefully you'll buy enough groceries to earn that discount back. All of that is enshittification. Enshittification is, it's driving society into the ground. It's certainly driving first world society into the ground, and making life, if not unlivable, unpleasant, and if not unpleasant, in a lot of cases unaffordable. And it's here to stay. Enshittification is here to stay. There's no doubt about that. And that's the most disturbing thing about the book, is that enshittification is inescapable, and there's no going back. And it does make me wonder, and I'm sure it makes you wonder, how are we going to function in the future with a completely, universally, 100% enshittified world? Is it going to be a world that's worthwhile to even participate in? These are big questions. And I have no answers. These are for you, the younger generation. These are questions that you will have to answer. These are forces that you will have to wrangle. My generation is out of the picture. Young people have to protest. Remember, kids, you've got to hate the phone company. I mean, you really, really have to hate the phone company. That's where I work. In the lab. Go berserk. In my lab. That's where I work. That's what you're watching. Friend love. That's what I'm doing. Working at the bench again. I'm Fran.